$2,000, he whispered. $2,000. At this moment, Matilda isn't a daughter. She's a transaction, sold by the father who claimed to protect her. She's being sent into what she believes is a living hell, but the secret awaiting her in Arthur Shaw's house is more painful and more freeing than anyone in town could possibly imagine. Many people now would surely think, "Why didn't you run away? Why didn't you scream?" Oh, my dear, when you've been locked in a cage for 20 years, you forget you even have wings. I was terrified, yes, but I didn't even know that having another choice was possible. That was a lot of money back then. Enough money to keep the family for several months. And all he wanted in return was a wife. "And if I refuse?" "You can't refuse," my father said. "I've already given my word." He had already given his word, without asking for mine. He had already committed me, without me knowing. He had already decided my future, without my participation. "Does Mama know about this?" I asked. "Your mother. Your mother agrees it's the best thing for you." A lie. When I looked into her eyes, peeking from the kitchen, I saw she was suffering just as much as I was. "When is the wedding?" "Next Saturday." "Next Saturday. Just 9 days from now." "So soon?" "He wants to get it settled quickly. And we need to get it settled quickly, too." That night, I cried until I had no tears left. 20 years waiting for love. 20 years dreaming of a Prince Charming, and I was going to marry out of necessity to a man I didn't even know, who was old enough to be my father. "Mama," I sobbed in her lap. "I'm scared." "I know, honey," she cried with me. "I'm scared too. But sometimes life forces us to do things we don't want to. Why does it have to be me? Why can't one of my brothers find a way?" "Because your brothers are men. A man doesn't get married to solve family problems. A woman does. A woman does. As if it were our destiny to be bargaining chips, solutions to problems we didn't create." That was the moment, my dear, when I felt worse than an object. I wondered, "God, have you forgotten me?" I thought it was the end of my life, but as it turns out, it was the very first door opening. But what I didn't know yet was that the man I was going to marry kept a secret. A secret that explained why at 45 he had never been interested in any woman. A secret that would make our story very different from what anyone could imagine. Arthur Shaw was a walking mystery in the town of Harmony Creek. At 45, tall, broad-shouldered, with well-kept grayish hair and brown eyes that always seemed sad, he aroused curiosity and gossip wherever he went. "Why do you suppose that man never got married?" the women at the market would whisper. "It's not for lack of money, he has plenty of that. Or for lack of looks," another would add. "The man is well built, then he must be." Strange. Strange. The speculation ran rampant through the town streets. Some said he was sick with something contagious. Others swore he had killed someone in the past, and that's why he lived in isolation. The more malicious ones whispered that he didn't like women, that his interests lay elsewhere. Arthur lived on a farm 3 miles out, in a large brick house with a wide porch and a well-kept garden. He had land, cattle, employees, everything a man could want in those days. But he lived alone. Alone with an old housekeeper, Mrs. Davis, who took care of the house. "Mr. Arthur is a good man," Mrs. Davis would always defend him when she heard the gossip in town. "He treats everyone well, pays fairly, doesn't harm a soul." "Then why doesn't he get married, Mrs. Davis?" they'd ask. Ah, only he can answer that. And what no one knew, what Arthur guarded as the biggest secret of his life, was the real reason he had never gotten close to any woman. It wasn't for lack of desire. It wasn't because he was sick. It wasn't because he preferred men. It was out of shame. Arthur had been born with a problem that, in those days, had no scientific name, no medical explanation, no treatment. It was simply a curse he carried between his legs. A birth defect he discovered in his adolescence, and that had tormented him ever since. His private parts were disproportionately small. Not just small, but minuscule, the size of a small child's. When the other boys his age began to develop, to talk about women, to brag about their conquests, Arthur realized he was different. "My God," he cried at 16, looking at himself in the mirror. What did you do to me?" He tried to talk to his father, but old Mr. Shaw was a rough man, the kind who didn't talk about those things. "Stop that sissy talk, boy," was all he said. "Everyone is born as God wills it. As God wills it." But why did God want him to be like this? Why did he have to bear this cross that no woman would ever accept? Why did he have to live condemned to eternal loneliness? In his teens, Arthur tried a few times to get close to a girl, but he always backed out at the last minute. What if she finds out, he'd think. What if she tells everyone? What if she laughs at me? The shame was greater than any desire. Arthur, his father said when he turned 25, "When are you going to give me grandchildren?" "Someday, Dad," he'd reply. But he knew that day would never come. How could he provide grandchildren if he couldn't even think about getting undressed in front of a woman? The years went by, and Arthur became more and more isolated. He built a prosperous farm, accumulated wealth, but couldn't build a family. Every time he saw couples in town, he felt a pang in his chest. Every time he heard babies crying, he imagined what it would be like to have children. "Mr. Arthur," Mrs. Davis said to him when he turned 40, "aren't you thinking about getting married? This house needs a lady." "I'm not, Mrs. Davis," he'd reply. "Marriage isn't for me." "But why, Mr. Arthur? You're a good, hard-working man." How could he explain that the problem wasn't being good or hard-working? How could he say the problem was in what he couldn't show, in what he couldn't offer? How could he confess that he felt less of a man than any teenager in town? The nights were the worst. Alone in the large farmhouse bedroom, Arthur would look at himself in the mirror and try to imagine what it would be like if he were normal. "If I were like other men," he'd think, "I'd have a wife by now, I'd have children, I'd have a real life." It was when he turned 43 that the loneliness began to become unbearable. "Mrs. Davis," he said one morning, "do you think any woman would marry me, even if I'm different?" "Different how, Mr. Arthur?" He couldn't answer. How could he explain without dying of shame? Different. Just different. Everyone's different, Mr. Arthur. The important thing is to have a good heart. A good heart, he had. But would it be enough? It was then he began to think of a solution he had never considered before. What if he found a woman who would marry him out of necessity, not love? A woman who needed financial security more than other things. A woman who might even be relieved not to have to fulfill all her conjugal duties. If I could find a wife like that, he thought, at least I wouldn't die alone. At least I'd have company, someone to talk to, someone to take care of the house. It wouldn't be love, but it would be better than eternal loneliness. It was when he learned of Walter Hayes's family situation that he saw an opportunity. His daughter, Matilda, was 20. She was a good family girl, pretty, hard-working, but still single. And the family was in dire straits. Maybe, he thought, this is the chance I've waited for my whole life. A young, inexperienced girl who won't have high expectations. A family in need that won't ask too many questions. A situation that one's problem. "Mr. Hayes," he said, when he went to make the proposal, "I want to marry your daughter." He saw the astonishment in the man's eyes. "I know I'm old enough to be her father," he continued, "but I promise to take good care of her, give her everything she needs, treat her with respect." "And what do you want in return?" Walter asked, suspicious. "Just a wife," Arthur replied. "Someone for company, to take care of the house, to have a family." He didn't lie. He just didn't tell the whole truth. $2,000, he offered, knowing it was an amount the family couldn't refuse. "And I'll pay for the wedding, buy the girl's trousseau, take care of everything." It was a lot of money, much more than any normal dowry. When Walter accepted, Arthur felt a mixture of relief and terror. He was finally going to get married. He finally wouldn't die alone. But what would the wedding night be like? How was he going to explain it to the girl? How was he going to face the disappointment in her eyes? "Mrs. Davis," he said when he returned home, "I'm getting married. Praise the Lord," she exclaimed. "To whom?" "To Walter Hayes's daughter, Matilda. The girl is young, Mr. Arthur. Will you know how to make her happy?" Make her happy. If only she knew he wasn't expecting happiness, just companionship. If only she knew he didn't want passion, just someone who wouldn't leave when they discovered the truth. If only she knew he was willing to pay any price not to die alone. In the days that followed, Arthur prepared everything for the wedding with obsessive care. He bought the best fabric in town for the bride's dress. He ordered a cake, sweets, drinks. He hired a fiddle player to liven up the party. He wanted everything to be perfect. Maybe, he thought, if I make her happy in every other way, she'll forgive what I can't give. Maybe kindness would compensate for anatomy. Maybe generosity would compensate for inadequacy. Maybe respect would compensate for disappointment. But deep down, very deep down, Arthur knew he was fooling himself. He knew that no 20-year-old woman was going to be satisfied with affection and money. He knew that sooner or later, she would find out and leave. Or worse, she would stay out of obligation, unhappy for the rest of her life. My God, he prayed every night. Help me make this girl happy. Help me be the husband she deserves, even if I can't be the man she expects. And so, my dear, two human beings walked toward a marriage arranged by circumstances. She, a 20-year-old girl who had never kissed anyone, sold out of necessity. He, a 4-5-year-old man who had never undressed in front of anyone, buying companionship with money. Neither of them knew what awaited them. Neither of them imagined that from this improbable meeting, something unexpected would be born. Understanding, acceptance, and, who knows, love. The day of the 28th of January 1967 dawned cloudy in Tennessee as if even the sky was sad about what was about to happen. It was my wedding day, but I felt nothing close to joy. It was more like I was going to my own funeral. Tilly, my mother, called me early. Come have breakfast so we can get you ready. But how could I eat breakfast when my stomach was in knots? How could I pretend things were normal when my entire life was being decided by other people? The dress Arthur had made was beautiful. I can't deny it. White satin with delicate lace, a hand-tatted tulle veil with tiny flowers. You look as pretty as a princess, Mama said with tears in her eyes as she helped me dress. Princess. If I were a real princess, I'd be marrying for love, not necessity. If I were a princess, I'd be happy, radiant, eager to meet my prince. But she's not a princess. She's a sacrifice. As Matilda puts on the beautiful dress Arthur bought, she's preparing for a life of misery. What she can't possibly know is that the man waiting for her isn't a monster. He's just as frightened as she is, and he's hiding a secret that will change everything. Instead, I was there, trembling with fear, not knowing if it was fear of the unknown or fear of discovering things I didn't want to know. Honey, my father said, entering the room when I was almost ready. You look pretty and sad, I thought, but I didn't say anything. Tilly, he continued, his voice softer than I'd ever heard it. I know this isn't easy for you. Then why don't you stop all of this? I asked, still hopeful. Because I can't, honey. A man's word is sacred. And besides, he paused, looking at his own hands. There's no other way. There was no other way. That phrase that would haunt me for the rest of my life. How many bad decisions do we make because there's no other way? How many times do we give in to fate because we see no alternative? The Harmony Creek Community Church was full. It seemed the entire town had come to see Walter Hayes's girl marry the most mysterious man in the region. Everyone came out of curiosity, my cousin Teresa whispered. They all want to see how it's going to be. How it was going to be. I wanted to know, too. When the organ began to play the wedding march, I felt my legs go weak. Courage, honey, my father said, giving me his arm. God knows what he's doing. God knows what he's doing. But did he really? Was it his plan for me to marry a stranger? Was it his will for me to become merchandise in my own father's hands? I walked down the church aisle like a ghost. People stared, whispered, pointed. Such a pretty girl. What an age difference. Do you think she's happy? She looks a little pale. Must be nervous. Nervous was an understatement. I was terrified. And when I reached the altar and saw Arthur standing there in a dark suit, hair combed with pomade, looking at me with an expression I couldn't decipher, I almost fainted. He was handsome. I couldn't deny it. For a 4-5-year-old man, he was well preserved. Tall, elegant posture, a serious face, but not unpleasant. If it were just a matter of appearance, I would have nothing to complain about. Matilda Hayes, the preacher, began the ceremony. Do you take Arthur Shaw to be your lawfully wedded husband, to love and to cherish, in joy and in sorrow, in sickness and in health, in poverty and in wealth, till death do you part? Till death do you part. I looked at Arthur and saw that he was nervous too. His hands were trembling slightly, and there was a bead of sweat on his forehead. At least it wasn't just me who was scared. I do, I answered, my voice coming out weak. Arthur Shaw, the preacher continued, do you take Matilda Hayes to be your lawfully wedded wife? And he answered, I do, with a firm, decisive voice, as if he truly wanted this. The rings were exchanged, the kiss was given. My first kiss, ever, there at the altar, in front of everyone. Without love, without desire, just following protocol. His lips were warm, soft, but I didn't feel those butterflies in my stomach that other women talked about. I now pronounce you man and wife. Done. It was done. In 5 minutes, my entire life had changed. I was no longer Matilda Hayes, daughter of Walter. I was Matilda Shaw, wife of Arthur. The reception was at my parents' house, right in the yard, with tables borrowed from neighbors and food that Arthur paid for. The fiddle player played, people danced, everyone seemed happy, except me and the groom. Congratulations, Tilly. People came to congratulate me. May God bless you. May you be very happy. Happy. Everyone wished happiness for a couple that barely knew each other, who had married out of convenience. Arthur stayed by my side the entire party, polite, attentive, introducing me to people as my wife. My wife. 2 words that sounded strange on his lips, as if he didn't believe it himself. I glanced over at my family. My mother was weeping silently into a handkerchief, and my brothers, James, Michael, Robert, Daniel, and Thomas. They were standing near my father, looking down at their boots. Not one of them met my gaze. In that moment, I understood what my father's rule truly meant. It wasn't just that girls were prisoners, it was that his sons were his soldiers. Their loyalty was to him, not to their sister. Their silence was the final lock on my cage. Matilda, he said to me during the party, are you all right? You look tired. It was the first time he had spoken to me directly all day. I'm fine, I lied. How could I be fine on the most terrifying day of my life? If you want, we can leave early, he offered. Leave? To where? To his house, which was now my house too. To his room, which was now our room. To his bed where... Oh God, I couldn't even think about it. No need, I replied quickly. We can stay a little longer. Because the more time at the party, the less time alone with him. The more party, the less intimate talk. The more people around, the less chance of having to face reality. But every party ends, and ours ended when it was past 10 o'clock at night. Well, said Arthur, I think it's time. The hour that every bride fears and desires at the same time. Except I only feared it. Tilly, my mother kissed me, crying. Be happy, honey. And remember, be obedient to your husband. He will take good care of you. Obedient. Another word that amazed me. As if I were a pet that had changed owners. Take good care of my daughter, my father said to Arthur, shaking his hand. You can count on it, Mr. Hayes. I'll treat her like a queen. And that was the last time I truly felt like his daughter. Many people ask if I forgave my father. Forgiveness is a long journey, my dear. The love was still there, but that day he sold me. It built an invisible wall. We never truly went back to how things were. A prisoner queen, I thought, but I said nothing. The old Ford truck that took us to his farm was the most silent journey of my life. Me, sitting next to him, watching the dark road, trying not to think about what would happen when we got home. Matilda, he said halfway there, I know this is all strange for you. Strange was an understatement. But I want you to know that I'm going to do everything to make you feel comfortable in our home. Our home. As if it were mine, too, when I had never even set foot there. Thank you, was all I managed to reply. What else could I say? That I was dying of fear? That I wanted to go back to my parents' house? That I didn't want to be anyone's wife? When we arrived at the farm, I was impressed. It really was a large, beautiful house with a garden, a wide porch, all very well kept. "Welcome to your home," Arthur said, giving me his hand to help me down from the truck. Mrs. Matilda, Mrs. Davis, the housekeeper, greeted me at the door. What a joy to have a new lady of the house. Lady of the house, another new word to get used to. At 20, I had become the lady of a house I didn't even know. Mrs. Davis prepared the room, Arthur said, and I felt my heart race. The room. The moment I feared most was arriving. "If you want to take a look around the house first." "No," I replied too quickly. "I'm tired. Better to go to sleep." Sleep. As if that were all that was going to happen in the room. As if it weren't our wedding night. The night I was going to stop being a girl and become a woman. The night all of life's mysteries were going to be revealed. "Well," Arthur said, stopping at the bedroom door. "This is our room now. Our room. A large, comfortable, king-sized bed of dark wood. A mirror. Everything very nice. But all I saw was the bed. That bed where? "Matilda," he said, and there was something different in his voice, something that sounded like fear. "I need to talk to you before we go to bed." "Talk about what?" "About how it was going to be. About what he expected of me." "You can speak," I said, my voice trembling. And it was then that Arthur told me the secret he had kept for almost 30 years. The secret that would change everything between us. Arthur stood in the bedroom doorway for what felt like an eternity, his hands trembling, his face pale as if he were about to faint. "Matilda," he said finally, "sit there on the bed. I need to tell you something very important." I sat on the edge of the bed, my heart pounding so hard I was sure he could hear it. "What is it?" I asked, preparing for the worst. Was he sick? Did he have something contagious? Was that why he'd never married? He walked to the window, stood with his back to me, looking at the starry sky. "Matilda," he began, his voice trembling, "you must be wondering why a man my age, never married, never had a girlfriend, always lived alone. It was true. Ever since I found out I was going to marry him, that question hadn't left my mind." "You must have your reasons," I replied, trying to sound calm. "Everyone has their reasons. Yes," he sighed. "I have my reasons, and you need to know them before we are truly husband and wife. Truly husband and wife." I felt a shiver just imagining what that meant. "Matilda." He turned to face me, and I saw tears in his eyes. "I have a problem. A problem that I'm very ashamed of. A problem. What kind of problem could a man have that would shame him so much? I was born different from other men," he continued, wiping his eyes with the back of his hand. "Different how?" I asked, curiosity overcoming my fear. "Matilda, my private parts. They're very small." Small. I didn't quite understand what he meant. In those days, a girl from a good family knew nothing about the male body, about those intimate things. "Small how?" I asked naively. Arthur hung his head, his hands covering his face. "The size of a small child's, even smaller. That's why I never married. Never had a girlfriend. Never been with any woman. She was prepared for cruelty, for pain, or for disgust. But not for this. Not for vulnerability. In one single confession, Arthur has just handed this 20-year-old girl all the power in their relationship. What he offers her next, though, is the one thing she's never been given in her entire life. "But is that a serious problem?" I asked, still not fully understanding. "Yes, Matilda. It's a very serious problem, because a husband has to satisfy his wife. And I can't satisfy a wife." I didn't really know what that meant, but from the sadness in his eyes, it had to be something very important. "And why did you marry me then?" I asked. "Why?" He sighed deeply. "Because I can't stand living alone anymore. Because I wanted to have someone to talk to, someone for company, someone to care for and be cared for by. But I can't offer you what a normal husband offers." "And what does a normal husband offer?" The question slipped out before I could think. Arthur looked at me, surprised. You really don't know?" "I don't know. No one ever explained those things to me." It was then he did something that surprised me. He smiled. For the first time since we'd met, I saw a real smile on his face. Then maybe, he said slowly, maybe this isn't the end of the world I imagined. Why not? I asked, confused. Because if you don't know what you're missing, maybe you won't miss it so much. He walked over to the bed, sat down beside me. Matilda, can I ask you a question? Yes. Do you feel desire for men? Do you feel the urge to be touched, kissed, and those things? I blushed to the roots of my hair. How could I answer a question like that? I don't know, I stammered. I've never thought about it. You never felt anything when you looked at a boy? No, I answered honestly. My daddy never let me get close to any boy. I've never had a real conversation with any man, besides my brothers and him. Arthur fell silent, thoughtful. So, you truly don't know what you'd be missing? He asked, almost hopeful. I've only ever felt curiosity, I admitted. Not desire. He nodded slowly. I'm the opposite, he confessed, looking away. I felt desire. A lot of desire to know a woman, to have a family, but I was always terrified of this part, the intimate part. I was afraid of the shame. And now? I asked. Now that you've told me your secret, what? Now, I don't know, he admitted. It depends on you. It depends on whether you can accept an incomplete husband. Incomplete. I looked at this 4 or 5-year-old man, crying in shame in front of me, feeling less of a man because of something he couldn't control. And I felt something I had never felt before. Pity. Not cruel pity, but a tender pity. Arthur, I said, using his name for the first time, you've suffered a lot because of this, haven't you? My whole life, he admitted. I've always felt less of a man than the others. Always been ashamed. Always lived in hiding, and no one ever knew. Just me and God. And now, you. Now me. A 20-year-old girl who knew nothing about life. Now I held the biggest secret of a 4 or 5-year-old man. Matilda, he asked, his voice full of hope and fear. Can you accept this? Can you stay with me, even knowing that our marriage will be different? Different. I looked at this man who had bought me as a wife, but who now showed himself to be as vulnerable as I was. Different how? I asked. Without physical intimacy, he explained, blushing. Without children. Without those things that other couples have without children. That hurt a little, because every woman dreams of being a mother. But at the same time, I felt a strange relief. You mean, you're not going to demand that I? No, he said quickly. I'm not going to demand anything you don't want to give. We can be partners, friends, take care of each other, but only if you want to. Did you hear that? For the first time in her life, Matilda is being given a choice. The man who bought her is the only one who ever asked what she wanted. Her decision right here will set the course for the rest of her life. Let's see what she does with this new, terrifying freedom. Only if I wanted to. For the first time in my life, someone was asking me what I wanted. Not what my father wanted, not what was expected of me, but what I, Matilda, desired. And, if I accept? I asked.